This
hour and a half.
conference will now be recorded.
We have about an hour and a half to fit in a bunch of great material today. So without further ado, I'd love to start with the introductions, and we'll go with the folks in the room. Right now, you're listening to Mary Kate Costello. I am the Senior Policy Analyst and UN Rep at the Hunger Project, based in the DC office with the Movement for Community-Led Development.
Hi, I'm Gunjan. I'm the Senior Advisor for Public Policy and Advocacy at the Hunger Project, and I'm leading the meta-synthesis, which you will hear more about as we go on today.
Hi, I'm Toby, and I'm interning the Hunger Project.
Great, now we'll go to those folks connecting online. Peace Director, are you there? Do you want to introduce?
Evariste, Burkina Faso.
Hi, I'm Kimberly. I'm with Global Communities, and I'm based in Kenya.
Hello, my
Good
name
morning.
is
This is Andrew.
Sorry.
Hello. Hi, this is Caroline Basigi with Heifer International based in Washington.
Hi, this is Alexis Banks with Root Change in Washington, D.C.
Hi, this is Beth Frank with Church World Service in Chicago.
Rebecca Nelson, America Solidaria here in DC, representing Latin America.
Hi, this is Sarah Onyemboka-Boyer from PACT, Washington, D.C.
Nellie Mecklenburg from Institute for State Effectiveness in D.C.
Hi, this is Diana.
And Silvia.
From the Hunger Project, Mexico.
Hi, this is Rosemary Forrest from Peace Direct in London.
Hi, this is Janet Edmond from Conservation International.
Good morning, this is Andrea Farmer from the Hunger Project Global Office.
Anybody else on the phone?
Yes. Hello, yeah, this is...
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Matt Laniel from Newer International from DC.
Hi, this is Tori from the Hunger Project office in New York.
Hello, this is Salem from Peace Direct in London. Can you hear me?
We can, yes. Thanks, Alan.
Hello, this is Allison and Kate from Glimmer of Hope.
And Allison from Global Giving.
Hello.
Hello, workshops from
Evariste from Burkina Faso.
So we have Webshot for Bread for the World and Every from sorry, do you know which organization did you say you're with?
Hi, sorry, Restless Development.
Awesome, thanks for joining us. All right, there's no one else on the line. We'll get started. We have a great group today representing multiple parts of the world and a huge number of our member organizations, so thanks for joining us today. We are going to kick it off with sharing the screen from London so that Peace Direct can share with us two of their recent projects with USAID. They're helping to do research and M&E with them on 2 projects, one called Stopping a Success and one around financial sustainability. So I'm going to now share the screen to Salem and Rosemary and hand it off to them. And in between each presentation, we'll turn to our members for questions.
Great, thank you very much. I just wanted to check that I've done this correctly. Can you all see my screen here?
I'm going to share it right now. So hold on one. So you're now presenter, so you'll be able to select to share your screen from your end. You're now the presenter, Peace Direct.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just do that now. Share, okay. There we go. I think it should all be coming up now.
Great,
Yep.
We got it, thank you.
Fantastic. So thank you very much, first of all, for having us. We've had a few technical glitches, so I apologize in advance. We're sitting in our main office, so we may at times have some background noise. I thought as a start off with just some quick round of introductions. My name's Rosemary Forrest. I am the Senior Advocacy Officer here at Peace Direct, and I'm leading our engagement in the UK and to a limited degree in the EU, looking at how we can help facilitate greater shifts in power and strategic direction to local organizations, particularly in peace building, but looking more widely to across development humanitarian nexus. I'll just hand over very quickly to my colleague Salem to let him introduce himself.
Hello, yeah, I'm the research officer for the Stopping as Success project here with Peace Direct. My role is with researching the various case studies and working on the issue papers that we'll discuss shortly.
Great, thank you. So I'm not sure how much people are aware of Peace Direct or if anyone's familiar. So I thought for our presentation today, I'll do a quick background or I guess introduction on Peace Direct, our 2 projects. And then I'll go into a little bit more detail around the facilitating financial sustainability, followed by a Q&A on that. And then Salem will present our Stopping a Success project with that, if that works for everyone. Essentially, Peace Direct, we're a peace building charity focused on promoting and supporting locally led approaches and local peace builders themselves. For that reason, we don't have country offices, and we're based here in the UK, and we have a small team in London, in the US, sorry. With our international programs, we have partners with 15 local organizations across 12 countries, and that's on a wide range of issues, ranging from reintegration of child soldiers to ethical gold mining. And the emphasis there is very much on our partners leading that direction from the start to the finish. We also have a small but growing policy and research team, which is where the 2 of us sit. And with that, our work is really about raising the profile of local approaches, whether that's through what we have called peace exchanges on key issues, or increasing the visibility of the organizations themselves. We've also been undertaking a wide range of research on the kind of more systematic issues, and that's where these 2 projects fall in. Just as a kind of overarching view, both the facilitating financial sustainability and Stopping a Success are USAID funded projects under the Local Works Office. So they are kind of that co-design process that came out from the BAA Awards. And with that, they're both 3-year programs, and we're entering the 3rd year for both of them. So I think with that, you know, both these projects, and maybe this is where we differ slightly from the movement, is our emphasis is really on what INGOs or donors need to be doing differently to help in their relationships with local organizations to help facilitate that shift in power, that shift to create the, you know, locally led approaches, development, and ownership. We don't really see ourselves as the implementers, but probably more in a role of facilitating, accompanying, and offering solidarity. And with that, if there's no burning questions about who we are, I might jump straight into the facilitating financial sustainability, if that works for you.
That sounds great. Thank you, Rosemary.
Great, thank you. So the Facilitating Financial Sustainability is a consortium project which is led by our partner Link in the US, along with ourselves and the Foundation Center, who were involved in the first year. Now, the research for this was across 6 different countries: Colombia, Mexico, DRC, Uganda, Philippines, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. And essentially, it was looking at kind of 2 sides of the same coin. One is what actual funding and types of funding or support is available for local organizations to help support financial sustainability, recognizing that financial sustainability isn't just about money. And the other aspect was what local organizations and what their international partners can do differently, or what factors at a systematic level can help shift that sustainability issue. I think something that, for me at least, is really important to acknowledge is that a lot of these factors, they're not new. We don't expect this to revolutionize anyone's lives, but it is about a different approach and a different way of looking at the issues. So instead of taking each factor as on its own, it's really understanding that they're interlinked, and that by recognizing that linkages, we can better create these supports. So in today's presentation, I'm just going to spend about 6 to 8 minutes going through just a few of the key findings, and looking at where our group has got to now. Essentially, I won't go into all the research approach or bore you with that, but essentially it involved a wide mixture of qualitative data, as well as a lot of quantitative analysis, which the Foundation Center undertook. And we now have 3 core publications, which I can share the links after to those. But essentially, it was all about, when it comes down to it, what do we mean when we talk about financial sustainability, and how do we achieve it? I think the 3 topics, or I guess factors, that I wanted to focus on are social capital, unrestricted funds, and non-financial resources. And the reason I chose these is I think they really help exemplify the interconnection between these issues, and partly challenge INGOs, at least, and that's the main people that I'm dealing with on a daily basis, and donors, about how we think about sustainability, that it's not just about spreadsheets, it's not just about our accountancy, etc. So with the social capital, we found that this was a key enabler for local organizations, particularly in difficult environments, especially in places when you're looking at DRC, or in Uganda if you're working on challenging issues where that civic space is increasingly reducing, or where there's growing conflicts. And with the social capital, we're talking about anything from the community support, public perception, network participation, or even the organizational leadership. One example that came up in the course of this research came from the DRC, actually, where we had one organization who, since 2005, had little to no external funds. Now, this was based primarily on where their location was. They were based in the Far East, in an area that wasn't getting a lot of donor support and wasn't receiving a lot of interest. But they'd taken a very focused approach to actually building their social capital, in gaining the participation of the communities within all their planning, and which meant that they were actually responding a lot more to the community's needs, which, as an INGO, I look at and go, well, isn't that what we all want anyway? But that this actually had a massive impact on their financials, because volunteers and community contributions were able to help them through particularly challenging sides. Now, in terms of what can be done to help support this, obviously, it's not new that social capital is a huge impact, has huge impact, whether that's on financing, impact more generally, so or on, our legitimacy as organizations. But what I think is interesting is how donors and INGOs can help support this, particularly through their flexibility, both in their programming and their funding, and allowing their partners and helping facilitate their partners take those risks, engage more, and respond more to their communities, which I think is something that can be a challenge in relinquishing that control. And I'm aware that I probably will say control and power a lot in the course of this call, but it seems to be a recurring theme. The second area that I wanted to look at was the unrestricted funds, particularly pooling of unrestricted funds. So not just, applying to major donors and hoping that some of that is unrestricted, but how we can get small amounts of funding over a long period of time, whether that's from community or staff members, and that this actually allows for an outsized impact on sustainability, much more than you could have expected, or that we expected in our research at least. An example for this that came out was from Mexico, where one of the small organizations that had been actually quite reliant on international donors, their board took a kind of long-term view and recognized that they'd experienced a lot of ups and downs, very much being too dependent on these donors, and they decided to establish a reserve equity fund, which the board members themselves contributed to. And in this case, they actually managed to find an international donor who was really interested and concerned about financial sustainability, who matched those funds. With, how organizations themselves can help push and not push, but facilitate this. We've seen various examples from crowdsourcing online in the Philippines to local collections or social enterprises. Membership contributions in particular have kind of cropped up in a number of examples. What I find really interesting about this idea and using these unrestricted funds from community is that it's so strongly linked to the social capital. And without that social capital, an organization or individual volunteer's ability to raise those funds and galvanize that support is really going to be limited. And again, donors and INGOs can really support this through the flexibility of their funding, but also recognizing and acknowledging that small amounts of unrestricted funds as part of a larger program can help contribute to the longer sustainability. Finally, on the findings aspect, is the importance of non-financial resources. And this one to me, I think is really interesting because I think we often forget about it when we talk about financial sustainability. And, the capacity of non-financial resources, whether that's land and housing, local volunteer time, or locally sourced in-kind goods, can have as much of a contribution as actually money, to supporting sustainability. Going back to the DRC, we've seen this in a number of organizations and even, loose networks that wouldn't have called themselves organizations. For example, one youth-led, fully volunteer-run organization doesn't accept any, and they've chosen not to accept any external funds from organizations, foundations, INGOs, etc. And they rely specifically on volunteer time, but also community contributions. Now, what they do support or receive from INGOs and donors is around capacity building and technical training, and that's what they've really valued. I think another example that links very strongly to the unrestricted pools of funds is where an organization in Uganda were able to use that to then purchase land. Now that's something, particularly the purchasing land, I think is an interesting one because it often raises concerns around risks when you're talking to INGOs or donors about corruption, around transparency, etc. But that openness and flexibility, and of course being aware of potential risks, but allowing for that space, we found is where the greatest contributions to sustainability over the long term can be made, and actually which can really help small organizations weather changes in civic space, changes in donor priorities, and just their own internal issues that organizations can go through peaks and troughs. Anyway, I'll stop with the findings there and just kind of go on to where we are now, because I think this is actually probably the most exciting bit about our facilitating financial sustainability work, which is the action learning groups. So after this research, which took place over kind of a year and a half, 2 years, in Colombia, DRC, and Uganda, ourselves and Link have been running, or I guess facilitating, action learning groups. This is essentially where groups of local organizations, local government, businesses, and ideally INGOs and government donors can collectively identify and prioritize some activities based on these research findings that they want to work on to help improve their financial sustainability, provide an opportunity for learning, growth. It's essentially as the name says, action learning. Now, I've used the DRC Action Learning Group here because it's the one that Peace Direct is most involved with. And in that group, we have 23 local organizations with 2 representatives from the regional government and 1 local business. Unfortunately, what's interesting, I think, is that despite all the rhetoric from INGOs and donors about shifting the power, two-way listening, etc., all INGOs and donors dropped out of these groups after the first meetings. It wasn't a priority for them. They didn't have time. And I fully understand varying or competing interests in time, but it was an interesting thing that really contradicted the learning that came out about that need for two-way listening. Now, with DRC, the group has decided to actually focus on advocacy and advocacy in relation to flexible and unrestricted funding. And with that, they're looking at both local and international donors that are operating in Eastern DRC and how over the next year they're going to work with those donors to try and shift their understanding of what flexible or unrestricted funding could look like in that context, how it could help those organizations in their financial sustainability, but also start shifting some of the wider aid patterns. And that's what the Action Learning Group took for themselves as what they wanted to focus on. We, as kind of the facilitator, don't have much say. Of course, we're involved and can help with those conversations, but I think it's an exciting time to see over the next year how that group approaches that, how they can operationalize that. And then at the end of the year, looking at how the groups from Uganda and Colombia have also taken their work forward. Just as a final point on that, I think the action learning groups themselves do a lot of peer-to-peer learning in terms of sharing who amongst themselves have advocacy skills, who amongst themselves have better contacts regionally or very locally. And it's kind of, it's an exciting time for us and seeing where that goes. I think I will probably stop there. I'm probably about at time. Just to say, you can access the various research and on the link here that you should now be able to see, which is www.sustainability.link with a C, local.org. And the research itself covers one side, which is understanding the drivers of CSO's financial sustainability, and that's based on the specific research and interviews with organizations themselves. And then the other is looking at the donor trends and analysis that the Foundation Center did. There's also a synthesis report that brings them all together. But I'm very aware that I am at my time, so I will stop there and I will open it up if you have any questions. And yes, please fire away.
Thank you, Rosemary. So at this time, before she goes into stopping as success, we'd love for folks to make any comments or questions. And I'll also let folks know that I will make sure to share this link and others that Peace Direct has in the follow-up email as well. Folks can feel free to unmute at any time and ask a question or put it in the chat box as well. Well, I have a question from my end, Rosemary, and I'm sure folks may have more once they hear the second presentation as well, as they can think about comparing the two research projects. One of mine is, you mentioned thinking about, creatively thinking about activities and work that can be sustainable, especially financially sustainable. You talked a little bit about the DRC work around that and what the working groups have come up with. Do you have a couple of other more particular examples of things that have been done in implementation that have yielded successful financial sustainability? Maybe just one or two examples.
Yes, of course. I think I'll jump in on that. One thing that really came out strong, and I will highlight too that it's also a challenge, and as much of an example it set, there was also challenges, is particularly around social enterprises. This came out really strong in a number of the Uganda examples, where various organizations were able to use some of the resources that had been set aside, either through unrestricted funding or through pooling, to start small businesses, which were able to help provide financing, but also keep them going through harder times. There is, of course, I would add a caution with that there is then the danger of falling into mission creep, of which is your priority, your business or your NGO, and finding that role, and just because it's a good idea doesn't always mean that the skills and the experience are there. But that is increasingly something that we're seeing organizations do a little bit on the side as a way of helping. Particularly, I think in other senses where organizations really joined up and working with networks and offering peer-to-peer support, came up in places like the Philippines as a really strong way of learning from each other and helping build through harder times, especially in the face of government action or reaction to work. In terms of Peace Direct itself, we've been working over the last 2 years about how we as an organization put into place a number of these learnings, both from the facilitating financial sustainability, but also the stopping of success. And, we wouldn't say that this is an easy thing to do, how you shift that power, how we make sure that we as an INGO are doing everything we can that can help our partners and help others, but also that we're not inadvertently causing harm. And I think that's a important thing that we need to keep in mind ourselves. I hope that answers your question in a very long-winded way.
That's great. Any other folks have any additional questions or comments before we move on to the second portion of Peace Direct's presentation?
I'll just add, actually, that if anyone has any questions afterwards, that you can feel free to share my email address with the link to the publications, and I'm happy to chat more. I know it's hard sometimes when you've just been talked at to really then come back with questions, so please do feel free to email or Skype, etc.
Will do. All right, well, I think with that, we'll have Peace Direct move on to the second portion, which I believe Salem is going to take lead on, and this will be their segment on stopping as success. So I'll hand it back over to Peace Direct again, and to let you share your screen. You should still have the sharing mode as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to find the... Sorry, bear with me a second.
Do you want me to share it?
Yes, please, yeah.
It's up now.
Apologies, I've got too many windows open here. There we go. Okay, so our second project, which is also funded by USAID, is Stopping as Success. This project takes a slightly different approach. So with Stopping as Success, we look at responsible aid exits, transitions, and locally led development initiatives. Now, our goal with this is to understand how relationships between INGOs and local actors evolve during and after a transition process. But we take, methodologically speaking, we've adopted CDA's collaborative learning approach, which is we conduct joint learning and analysis between our consortium and the participating organizations. So all these case studies that we've conducted, we engage with those organizations in a sort of an iterative process. So the central premise behind this is that we want to put these local organizations at the center of the project, and we want to emphasize their experiences with international assistance and partnerships, because their perspectives, at least in our opinion, are an incredibly important but often neglected source of learning and guidance for improving future practice. Now, practically, what this means is we convene a range of individuals and organizations, and we analyze all the evidence that we've gathered collectively, and we engage in joint interpretation. So, for example, we recently conducted a regional workshop in Thailand, and we invited all the different case study organizations that we had engaged with in the Asia region, along with all the different people that we'd interviewed from civil society organizations in that area. And we invited them all to Thailand, where we engaged in a joint effort to interpret some of the findings that we had. So we've written various papers, we presented them to these individuals, and then we had them provide their comments back to us, which we are now incorporating into the drafts. And this is a continuous process that we go through. And we've adopted a similar approach with our case studies, where participating organizations get to review the drafts that we develop, and then they provide their input, and we go back and forth. And this creates an iterative and reiterative looping back through evidence gathering and analysis. So even as we develop lessons and codify them, we continuously go back and sort of share them with people to understand what goes on there. Now, we've conducted 20 case studies so far in 13 different countries. We are in the final stages. We're putting the final touches on the case study reports, and we're hoping to publish those over the course of the summer. But just to sort of give you guys a glimpse of sort of some of the conversations that we've been having with people. These are 3 quotations from different interviews that we conducted as part of our case study research. Now, you'll notice these probably don't sound too unfamiliar to people, but it's an important sort of thing that we're trying to highlight with these case studies. So I'll leave those up there for a moment for everyone to sort of take a look at. Yeah. Moving on, these are some of the overarching learnings that we've come up with so far based on these 20 case studies. Now, each one of these is an individual issue that we feel needs to be highlighted, and we plan to highlight these through the case studies and through the various papers that we're going to produce at a later date. But for the sakes of this presentation, I am going to focus on these 3. And I'm going to highlight these 3 through 2 case studies that we've conducted. These were both Peace Direct led ones, and they were the CREL project in Bangladesh and the Tungani project in DRC. I'm going to start with the CREL project. So the Windrock International, which is an INGO/contractor, they conducted the Climate Resilient Ecosystems and Livelihood Project, which was a 6-year funded project by USAID, implemented by them and various local partners alongside government agencies. The most specific one is the Bangladesh Forest Department. Now, the CREL project is about biodiversity protection and was implemented in protected areas in Bangladesh. Now, here CREL implemented what's called a co-management model. This was really important because of the history that, not to sort of delve into the weeds too much, but within Bangladesh, because of the population density, there's a lot of pressure on these forest areas. Local communities who have long their livelihoods have been contingent upon these forests for going back generations. But they were this stands in antagonism to the forestry department, which has a conservation goal. Now, because of that history of mutual hostility between these two things, co-management was presented as a solution to bring these different stakeholders together into a more sort of win-win situation. So, as the name suggests, it's a participatory structure where different stakeholders can negotiate and collaborate about how to effectively manage this set of natural resources. So here what CREL did is they actually created 45 community management organizations which bring together these different stakeholders from the local administrative bodies to the Bangladesh Forestry Department to the local communities, all into that one structure where these individuals and stakeholders can actually negotiate about how best to manage these natural resources. Now for the communities, in exchange for their participation in this sort of process and sort of helping to protect that forest, they are then offered support in terms of alternative livelihoods, and they're also entitled to receive a portion of funding that's generated from various tourist activities in the forest. Now, the research findings from this one, which I think are very interesting myself, is first off sustainability as a system. So organizations exist in a social, bureaucratic, financial, and political context, which makes achieving sustainability a function of influencing that system. Now, where CREL, I think, distinguished itself is that they actually put sustainability at the start of their thinking. So when the project began, they actively sought to implement a sustainability strategy from the get-go. That was their main preoccupation. It was not an afterthought. And the whole programmatic effort was geared towards that end, whether it was the advocacy efforts that they were implementing or the environmental awareness raising. All these efforts moved the system towards an enabling environment for the community management organizations. The second thing that they did is, and this I think is important for INGOs that are contemplating transition to sort of community-led development initiatives, the CREL project was continuously built off consultations with the local communities and with the national implementing partners, and they placed those consultations front and center. So without such input, the project runs a risk obviously of becoming a side apart from people's everyday lives, and the community would not have sort of been as receptive to what was being proposed here. But because they were so actively involved in designing it and deciding on what they wanted to do, that it became a part of the fabric of their sort of everyday lives. So for example, the CREL team, because they started out with a notion of sustainability that was developed with the communities and with the national partners, they weren't trying to impose a collection of sustainability metrics on these community management organizations. They recognized that these community management organizations were unique in their role and requirements, and they developed purpose-made indicators that actually reflected the realities of those organizations. Similarly, the same thing can be seen with their capacity development activities. So when it came to alternative livelihoods, for example, they devised those through a consultative process with the communities, making them far more likely to be internalized and put to use. So there was a concerted effort to converse with the communities and work with what communities were asking for, and build up the skills that they already had. It wasn't simply going in there and saying, okay, this is what you can do for an alternative livelihood. So I think that consultation process is another sort of really important thing. Lastly, co-management as a concept is not a new thing in Bangladesh, which I think made this project a success because the Bangladesh Forest Department was already very familiar with it. And what it meant was that Windrock and these various organizations involved did not have to produce a new concept. They did not have to expropriate something that was foreign to Bangladesh. They basically had to enable a sort of bureaucratic change, but that was far easier than if they tried to do a wholesale adoption of a new concept. So those are the three main things which I think are the takeaway from that case study. Now, moving on, this is the DRC project. DRC project, as the details on the slide present, okay? This was, again, an example of an INGO project exit, but it was driven by the end of a donor funding cycle. So it was actually, this project went through 3 phases. It was T1, T2, and then T2 plus Now, although the project did not have an explicit written exit strategy, the organization involved, which was IRC, treated T2 Plus as the de facto exit phase and focused on sustainability of service delivery improvements during that period of time. Now, during that phase, they began working much more closely with pre-existing Congolese structures and working through those, which they hadn't done previously. Now, communities were told from the beginning that the funding would be temporary and were informed about the exit 3 months before the program's closure. And obviously, they were very disappointed to lose such a large source of funding. But when we went back and we looked at the program evaluations that had been conducted, they all showed that the communities were highly appreciative of how participatory the program was run. And this is, I think, an important note to highlight here with this project, as well as with the earlier project, with the CREL project, which is that it's probably too soon to tell whether the program contributed to sustainable outcomes over the long term, especially given the ongoing humanitarian conflict-driven crisis in Eastern DRC. But nevertheless, if evidence from the evaluation has shown that several of the outcomes of the program have been sustained since it ended in 2016. Now, the research findings from this one, which I think are relevant for INGOs and international organizations, is that planning an exit can be challenging in the context of a time-limited development program that may or may not be extended. So Tugani was extended twice during its lifetime. However, the extensions also potentially created an expectation that a program exit would continue to be pushed back, especially as the political and security situation in Eastern DRC worsened over that same period of time. This places a premium on incorporating sustainability programming as a hedge against that. So rather than assuming that the program is going to continue, you have to sort of hedge against it. And I think that's why it's so important with community development to have that sort of sustainability thing in mind. The second thing is that in a highly participatory community development project, where all key decisions lie at the community level, not having a say in the decision to exit or end the program can cause tension. One of the challenges INGOs face, obviously, with developing that type of program, is that when it winds down, has that been led by the community priorities? So the decision by an international donor to end a program for whatever reason is not community driven, nor is the way in which the exit is communicated, i.e. the donor to the NGO and from the NGO to the communities rather than the opposite way around. So successfully managing an eventual exit process, particularly for programs such as this one, which were very large, requires strong engagement with local stakeholders from the moment that activity starts. And the last one, processes and practices such as accountability mechanisms, they often last much longer because while building service delivery infrastructure according to community identified needs is a core part of locally led development, less tangible elements such as reinforcing existing social accountability mechanisms can be equally important in the medium to long term. And those are the things that are already there. And lastly, where feasible, transition funding for communities to continue activities beyond the program's exit can often soften that cliff edge. So staff from the program and participating community members expressed the challenge of funding coming to an end with a few months of the closure of the program. So while the hope that program activity will continue using other funding sources was expressed, communities noted that a form of transitional funding to be used after the program had ended would have been very helpful. Just to discuss the next steps with, as I mentioned, we are looking to publish the 20 case studies in the coming over the summer, but we're also going to be publishing what we call issue papers, which are meta-analysis pieces that we're going to write using the case studies as the evidence base. And we've got several of those in the pipeline. Some are going to be about conflict, some are going to be about governance, about partnerships. There's several of them that we're going to be sort of working on. We're also going to be conducting further regional review meetings in London, I believe, and in Colombia in the coming months as well. And lastly, what we're going to be doing is hopefully turning some of the insights that we've generated from these case studies into tools that INGOs can actually use when they're thinking about exits and transitions. And that's where our project is at the moment. And I'm happy to open it to questions from there.
Well, thank you so much, Alan. Do we have any questions either in the room or on the phone?
Hi, this is Caroline from Heifer. I'd have a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So this discussion on exit strategies is very interesting to me, and I'm wondering, you mentioned this transition funding to soften that cliff edge effect, but how would you distinguish that conceptually between just regular project funding? And so it wouldn't just be another extension that kind of prolongs that project. Did you identify maybe any effective strategies to shift the sources of funding to the community to soften that exit?
Well, I'll have to get back to you on that one because, again, our focus was on the exit. That was a request from people when we were talking about this stuff. But from my vantage point, I think obviously that's going to be a conversation that one has to have with the communities themselves and figure out what's the most appropriate means to sort of move that forward, whether that is even feasible. Again, this was a request from them, but that's something that I think I'm happy to hear other people's views on as well.
This is Yendra. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I came about halfway through. So my question, I look forward to hearing the recording. So I've done some work on exit, and some of the best practices that I've seen are when people phase down, phase over before they phase out. So to what degree did you, even at the beginning in the conceptual idea of the design, did you actually plan as you're phasing out, if you were phasing out, to phase in partners to help continue the technical assistance, to help continue the programming, the resources, the capacity building, and so forth? Thank you so much.
Thank you for that question. It's a very good question. Just to reiterate, we are not actually conducting exits ourselves, but I'll reference the Bangladesh case study here, which I think is very important. One of the things that happened is that Windrock International leaned very heavily on its national implementing partners, and those national implementing partners, because of the sort of their own resources, their own knowledge base, and their relationships with the communities, even after the project had ended, they continued to provide support. So, for example, when we went to conduct our own research there, we met with the people from the national implementing partner and with the communities at the same time, and they had a magnificent rapport between them, and there was a continuous sort of back and forth. So the accompaniment to the community management organizations continued even after the project had finished. And I think that's something very important that we've come to realize, is that relationships is the end of a project does not mean the end of a partnership, does not mean the end of a relationship. So even though things might end from a technical standpoint, there's still opportunities to offer psychosocial support and mentorship that goes beyond that life cycle.
Thank you so much. May I just ask one follow-up question based on what you just said?
Yes, please.
And that is, to what degree did Windrock, in this case, design the expectations for exit with the communities from the onset? Thank you.
So I think what's interesting here is that when we talk about these type of projects, that exit and sustainability sort of go hand in hand. So in the case of both of those examples, I think that the communities, they had notions that the project would extend, but arguably that there's a question of whether that actually matters if you've actually implemented a sustainability strategy properly. That's one of the questions that we're sort of debating internally amongst ourselves at the moment, which is, if you've implemented a sustainability strategy properly and you've gone through all that steps and you've done everything that you've sort of accounted for, then do you need to have a conversation about exits, or does it really matter then? Do you need, you see what? Because if you've done that correctly, then when you leave is irrelevant, arguably.
Interesting.
But that's an internal debate we're still having amongst ourselves. So.
Hi. So I had two very simple questions. I was wondering on methodology. So one, you mentioned the issue papers that you were looking at and that you were planning to do a series of meta-analysis on different issues. So I was wondering, have you started with this, or I wasn't clear, or are you in the process? Have you seen certain trends coming across some of these which kind of tend you to think that there is a need for a meta-analysis which is sector specific on these case studies? So if you could
absolutely,
talk
Yeah. So far we have written 2 issue papers. One is about leaders and champions, and the second one is about capacity development. And those 2 themes are critical. We found they are context independent. Pretty much all of the case studies that we've been looking at, there is a role. Leadership plays such an important role when it comes to those organizations that are transitioning. And the second one, which is capacity development, which I think is, again, another very important thing, which we contrast with capacity building, which is that too often we focus on technical aspects, for example, but there's other stuff which is sort of going back to what I mentioned earlier, which is things like mentorship and leadership development that are just as crucial in the long run as technical abilities are. But yeah, there are definitely issues that are cross-cutting, and we are looking to write about those as we move forward.
Sorry, just as a follow-up to that, so are these issue papers available on the website? Could you share them with us?
No, the issue papers are still in draft. We're still going through iterations of those. Yeah, they're not, but hopefully there will be some of them available by the end of the year, along with the case studies.
Because we had, I mean, sometime back, in fact, we had a presentation and a discussion on capacity building versus capacity development, in fact, for the movement meeting itself. So I was wondering that it would be very interesting to hear some of the key things that came out of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, about that. Maybe you can share a couple of quick pointers. I don't know.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. I think actually, if you wouldn't mind, maybe we can take that conversation offline, and I can share with you some of those ones.
Sure, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Just to add on that point, actually, we'll be able to share those with the whole group once they're published later in the summer, and we can informally offline have conversations more in depthly about them. But because of the collaborative nature of this work and the analysis of these, we're not able to share the draft forms now. So apologies for the somewhat cloak and dagger discussions around these.
No worries, this was great. Thank you so much, both to Rosemary and Salim of Peace Direct. This was very helpful, and we'll circulate a summary of the presentation as well as any links you have, and if you're comfortable as well, we're happy to share the PowerPoint for folks if they want to go through and grab some of the details they may have missed or want to clarify on their end.
Sure.
Great, thank you. So at this time, I'm going to turn the screen back to the Hunger Project. Or do you need me to make you a presenter, Gunjan, for what your remarks? Okay. And we have Gunjan here with the Hunger Project, who's going to share the progress being made on the meta-analysis for community-led development. This should take about 5 or 10 minutes, and we'll open that up for questions as well. So the floor is yours, Gunjan.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone. We started off thinking of a meta-analysis. We kind of moved to doing a meta-synthesis. And we've had really great response and engagement from all the partners coming in. And thank you, everyone who is participating in the different subgroups, sending in ideas, sending in studies. I just wanted to quickly take this opportunity since the last meeting to also bring people up to speed on where we are at with this. So I think at the last meeting, we had talked about how, it's become this collaborative research effort with not just the Hunger Project doing the study, but, all the different organizations being a part of it, given the huge amount of resources we have between ourselves in terms of MEL expertise. So what's happened since then is that we have, as of date, we have around, it's 280 reports to be exact. As of this morning, we have 280 evaluations from 50 different countries, which have been sent in by partners. We're expecting another 30 to 40 to come in before the 30th of April, which is the deadline for the reports for this phase. If you or your organizations have not shared your reports, then please do. Because what we decided during the course of this time is that, yes, we are going to do a scoping exercise to look at evidence synthesis from these studies. But what we are also doing is, for the first time, we are creating a CLD landscaping map, which means that we are actually mapping the different kinds of programs that we have amongst ourselves in the movement. And then in some ways, this is also representative of the general CLD landscape, of what kind of programs are happening, what kind of aspects of CLD and community-driven development and community-led development actually get featured into programs, what aspects are more difficult to kind of come in. So we're trying to put all of that in and build this comprehensive map. So we were very keen that all our partners and their work is reflected in this. So before the 30th of April, please send in your studies if you haven't done so yet. But that's on the studies front. On the other front, what's happened is that we've created 3 subgroups, and we have over 30 people from 20 different organizations who are participating in these subgroups. They have committed to spend between 2 hours per week for a period of 8 weeks, which is the most intense subgroups, to about 4 to 5 hours per month over a period of 4 or 5 months, to make sure that the content of the study is robust and they're actually participating in content creation. The impact subgroup is having its first meeting tomorrow. I believe it's being co-chaired by Yindra. The scoping subgroup is going to have its first meeting this Friday, and the evaluation subgroup will have its first meeting next week. So yes, if any of you or people from your organizations are still interested in being a part of this, co-creation of this content for the study and looking at the evidence synthesis, so like Peace Direct was talking about, it's become a collaborative research project. So please get in touch with me. My email is gunjan.veda@thp.org, and I'll type this into the chat box as well. And if you have any questions at any point about the study, do let us know. The plan right now is that the subgroups are going to start work even as we are looking at the studies. By the end of May, we hope to have a scoping done. So we will have some kind of an idea of the landscape. The mapping that I was talking about, that's going to be available only by the end of June. But by the end of May, we would have had some idea of the scoping. We would have identified the studies for deep diving, and we would have begun the process, and we would have the indicators or the impact that we are looking at. We will be reaching out, the impact subgroup will be reaching out, I think, to different partner organizations to get a sense of the theories of change and how they see impact. Again, a request that please do respond to the request, because all the subgroups are working on a very strict timeline, and everybody in there is volunteering their time to make sure that this research is collaborative, but it's also robust and credible. So we would really appreciate if folks get back to them within the time frame that they indicate on the theories of change. So that's really what it. Oh, and the third thing I wanted to talk about was a group of advisors. So one of the things that had been suggested by a lot of people was that we should try and get in place a group of advisors on evaluations and CLD who can kind of oversee the study a little bit and give us feedback and broad level inputs, but also in terms of credibility and being associated with it. So we have the advisory group forming. 3 or 4 people have already confirmed that they will be willing to do this. Again, by the end of next week, we should be able to circulate an email with the names of the advisors for this group. If you have any suggestions, if there are people who you believe would be perfect for this because of their expertise in the domain, then please, again, let us know about this. The final update that I had on this was that as we are moving and we are talking about this, there has been a lot of interest in the metasynthesis from a lot of donors and partner organizations, but also we've presented at the Inter-American Foundation, and there's our new colleague here, who's actually just come into the room, Megan, has actually put in a proposal. We're putting in a proposal to CEDAW for phase 2 of the metasynthesis. So if anybody is interested in collaborating or working with us on this proposal, again, please reach out to us. The deadline for that is very soon, though. So we will be trying to wind this up next week. So yeah, but things are moving. There is a lot of interest. And a lot of people and partners have again been coming to us with ideas on platforms where we can take this and we can present and seek input. So again, thank you very much. Please keep those inputs and ideas coming in. If anybody has any questions, suggestions, comments.
Feel free if folks have any questions on the phone. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Gunjan. That's so helpful. And we'll be sure to also include a summary of that in the follow-up email, as well as details about the proposal that will likely be submitted next week for folks that may be interested in more information on what that involvement looks like. Moving now to the next agenda item of news from around the world. We have a few folks calling in from different parts of the world where they are regional coordinators or members of other chapters. So I'd love to turn now to see if we have any updates. Evariste, do you have any updates for us on the CLD movement in your region? Evariste, are you able to unmute and do an update for us on CLD in your region?
Hi, Mary Kate. This is Diana from Mexico. And we wanted to share, well, actually, that we are working right now with, we're going to have a meeting next week with the movement, with the organizations of the movement here in Mexico for updating about strategic changes that we've been going through in the Mexican office. But at the same time, because we wanted to share with them that we are participating for a grant with the British Council with a program which name is Active Citizens. So we can we want to make the project about the movement and the possibility of building a movement in a region here in Mexico, in one of the states that we are working here in Mexico, in San Luis Potosí, and we want to make this this focus on local authorities and local citizens for trying to really localize the movement and the CLD here in Mexico. And we will be telling you about this project and how we are trying to accelerate the movement here in Mexico, taking based in this alliance with the British Council, and trying to make them to make the British Council also a champion of the CLD.
That's great. Thank you so much, Diana. Evariste, I think you also were attempting to chime in too with updates from your region.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Since the last call, in Burkina we have no activity to share with you.
That's great. Thank you, Evariste. So were you going to say something? Okay. Do we have any updates as well from any other countries in Africa from folks on the phone? Perhaps Ghana, Nigeria, Malawi? I will note that many of the Hunger Project staff that do take up the movement as chapter coordinators are in our board meetings this week in Ghana, so we don't have as many folks on the phone from our chapters as usual. But now's the chance for other folks to have updates from around the world or things that their members want to update us from chapters that they're a part of as well. Going once, going twice. Okay, great. Well, we'll move on from that. I'll see if I can get a little bit more updates from other countries and chapters when I send out the circulation from today's meeting, so we can get a bit more of an idea of what's happening in many places. Wanted to now move into some advocacy updates with the last portion of our meeting here. We have some upcoming events throughout the summer and into the fall. We will be at Women Deliver. Well, the movement itself won't technically be there, but the Hunger Project will be there. So we will be sharing to our members a one-pager of the CLD movement. So, for example, the Hunger Project will have an exhibitor booth at the Women Deliver conference, and we will keep at our table handouts of the movement, and we would really love for other members to do the same. We don't expect that the movement should take over and be a large part of anyone's booths, but we do want it to be a commonly represented space, or excuse me, a commonly represented movement among the membership bases. So If folks are also going to be at the conference and or have exhibitor booths or events where there's an opportunity to just have a small stack of the one-pagers, that would be great, and we'll make sure we circulate that out as well. In the following week, the Hunger Project will be at the Interaction Forum. Same thing, we'll make sure we have movement pages there as well. But specifically, the movement will be hosting a deep dive as one of the side events at the Interaction Forum, where we will be discussing a collective impact as the movement around community-led development successes. And then a second space for the movement at the Interaction Forum, Gunjan will for the first time make a public announcement, so to speak, of the meta-analysis, the current progress, the overarching goals, the upcoming proposal, and what the long-term credibility of the study is hoping to achieve around building this evidence base for community-led development. So if there are any questions about that, or if you'll also be at either of those conferences, please do let us know. In July, the UN is hosting, again, their annual high-level political forum, and of particular interest to the movement this year is the focus on SDG 16, which has just been a priority SDG for the UN over the last year or so, regardless. And we are looking now over the next month to see how we will host an event, either a side event or a parallel event during the HLPF. So for folks who are also going to be there, please reach out. We'd love to collaborate several members together to host a CLD event at HLPF. And then in September, on the 23rd, the UN has their climate summit, and 24th, for about a week or so, the UN's annual General Assembly, high-level General Assembly. And we are in conversation now with some folks on hosting a event similar to last year, where we had a large conference room hosted by Missions, sponsored by Missions. But this year, we want the premise to be on financial devolution. So this overarching topic of the movement to see this 2% of national resource allocations increased up to a minimum of 20% among low-income countries. So that would be the highlight of the talk. And what we'd like to do is, and Kim, maybe your ears will perk up here too, Kim at Global Communities, since we've just launched out the movement in Kenya, where they have strong policies and implementation for fiscal devolution and decentralization of political implementation for community-led processes, seeing if Kenya may be the or one of the sponsors for this particular event. So we can chat more offline about that, Kim, and with the other members of the movement in Kenya, but we think that that may be one of the best strategies to highlight fiscal devolution in the low-income context. Any folks have any other upcoming events or things they'd like to share or questions regarding advocacy in the next several months? Okay, I'll just quickly give a brief on recent advocacy that we've done mostly at the UN. We participated in the Annual Commission of Social Development and also the Commission on the Status of Women, both of which we hosted events at and had speaking roles in other events. It's specifically at the Commission on the Status of Women, we were talking about women's community leadership and that particular need for social protection. And one of the topics that came up more often than it has in years past was the issue of migration and migrant populations and what community leadership looks like in even mobile communities. And for the Commission on Social Development, the overarching topic of social protection writ large and what it means to have communities take ownership of providing and filling gaps around social protection. So where governments cannot necessarily fulfill social protection needs or promises, where the responsibility and feasibility can be from a community, and what particular role NGOs have in building that capacity so that we can see social protection achieved in earlier time and in more real time, where sometimes there are delays in government fulfillment of that. So those were some great discussions held at those two commissions with America Solidaria, Church World Service, UNICEF, Restless Development. I may be missing several other organizations that joined us in these, the Hunger Project. Am I missing any others as well that joined us in those two commissions? I may be, and if I am, feel free to interrupt and call us out. We want to make sure people get their credit where credit is due. So never hesitate to reach out to the Secretariat of the movement based at the Hunger Project when you're going to these things, that we can be featuring and including as many members as possible.
Rebecca has an update.
Oh, Rebecca has an update as well. Oh, she said that America Solidaria will be engaging with the General Assembly of the Organization of American States in Medellin, Colombia in June. Awesome, Rebecca. If you're able to send us a couple sentences about that, we can include that in the circulation as well and see if other folks will be there, or if there's opportunity for you to meet with other members, et cetera. That sounds great. Any other updates from folks of recent advocacy they've done or questions on what's just been shared? Okay. The last thing I'll just share is the Secretariat spoke recently with the Hunger Project's communications team about how we will have a more dedicated strategy on raising visibility of the movement, especially through social media. So if you've noticed, we've been trying to tweet more through the movement's Twitter account, and we'll also start within the next month doing monthly newsletters. So if there are blogs the organization has put out, updates from your organization, events you are hosting, or events that the movement is hosting, summaries from our meetings, chapter updates, et cetera, we'll have it available in a very digestible and pretty newsletter for people so that we can keep all the updates in one place. And we encourage everyone to make sure, if their organizations are not already following, to follow the community-led dev Twitter account and tweet out to us, and we'll make sure that we're constantly highlighting your work as well. It's easier if you tag us than if we go and search what your different updates have been, because we might not catch everything in our news feed based on the number of folks we follow. So be sure to keep active with us on Twitter. Currently, we can give shout outs to some of the most active folks that have been with us on Twitter: America Solidaria, Church World Service, and I believe Peace Direct as well lately, especially with their engagement in this meeting. So get one of those shout outs as well upcoming, and be sure to keep in touch with us as needed, and you'll get a follow-up from today's meeting in the next several days. Before we log off, I want to turn it to anyone else if there's any other business or particular things you want to highlight your organization is doing, or any particular things on social media you'd like us to make sure we're highlighting. Okay, well, everyone gets a found 15 minutes today to add back to their Wednesday. Thank you so much for such a large attendance in today's call. We had just about 30 people from several regions: Latin America, Europe, North America, and Northwest Africa. So we really appreciate your engagement, and we wish everyone a great Wednesday. Thank you very much to Rosemary and Salam of Peace Direct, Gunjan of the Hunger Project, and those folks who were able to ask questions, and we'll follow up with you, America Solidaria, about your work coming up in June, and send around these advocacy points as well. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, America.
Bye, thank you so much. Thank you, Webchat.
Thank you.
This conference will now be recorded.